Hi, I'm Kent.
And I'm Anna.
We're married, we make movies, and we believe that anyone in any circumstance can make a feature film.
Welcome to the Feature Filmmaker Podcast. If you want a career making movies, you're in the right place.
Hit subscribe to never miss an episode.
Let's jump right in. All right, welcome to the podcast, Pete Salsich III. Did I get it right?
Yep, you did. Yeah, very good.
Really happy to have you here. I met Pete at our film's premiere at the St. Louis Film Festival. He was doing,
That's right.
You were moderating, right? A panel discussion?
Right. We were, yes, we for a number of years now, I've hosted a masterclass during the week of the film festival here in St. Louis, typically talking about legal or business issues related to film and filmmaking. And so that was what was going on when you were there.
Yes.
And I remember it was a pleasure to meet you. So I'm glad to be able to reconnect.
It's fun to see you again too. So Pete is a attorney who specializes in intellectual property and especially for people in film and the entertainment business. You're also a professor, I believe, at St. Louis University.
Adjunct, yes.
Adjunct
so I'm an
professor?
adjunct, yes, at St. Louis U Law School. I teach a class on a couple of upper division classes. They rotate on semesters, but typically it's intellectual property, licensing, and drafting. And it's really a contracts drafting class with intellectual property licensing structures built in to kind of get used to how you draft these things and how to think about these things. So
Yeah.
but yes.
Well, and this is great because I think, for example, and I don't want to throw any specific person or company under the bus, but we subscribed to a subscription that was supposed to be legal help for whatever your needs are. And I found that it was very difficult for them to understand how to navigate film because it was not specific to that. So I love that you are specifically focused on and working in our industry. You understand how that business works, and I thought it'd be really great to bring you on and share, first of all, just some of the pitfalls that people run into if they aren't aware of maybe common problems you see people running into on the back end that they wish they'd known before they started making their movie, especially people with super low budget first-time filmmakers. And then I'd also love to get into your specialty in intellectual property. In film, IP is like having a name actor. It can be really beneficial to getting financing and getting your film made. But it's also this area that I don't necessarily know how to navigate. And there's a lot of questions I have about that specifically. So,
no, I'm happy to have this conversation with you. Really, genuinely, not just happy because you asked and I said yes, but I really do like to share this information with, I'll say aspiring filmmakers, but also sometimes seasoned filmmakers. I mean, look, I run into people that have been making films for a dozen years because they started when they were 9 with their phone, and they're really good craftspeople. They can tell a story, they can frame issues, they can put all that stuff together, right? So you may be new to the filmmaking or newer to the filmmaking business, but you may have a lot of talent. And I run into people like that all the time. And it's that wanting to take that and turn it into a business, a life, a profession, a career, which is where typically before too long you run into somebody like me if you want to do that. And I would like that to be a pleasant experience and would like to have people to come into that without fear. And the biggest way I think to do that, and what I try to do when I put information out, is to let you know that while there are some key things to watch out for and some key things to take heart, it's not that complicated to do it right. And there's a couple of basic principles that apply, and then all the nuances on a deal by deal situation fit within a category you can kind of already understand, right? You may still have to deal with unique situations, but there aren't, completely out of the blue, never even thought that would come up kind of stuff. And the biggest sort of where I often start on this is trying to get people to understand, filmmakers to understand a couple of basic points. The first is copyright law governs all aspects of your film and the filmmaking process. Period. End of sentence. It never does not cover. It's literally always the key, because the entire business of the filmmaking process, that whole structure is based on there being one copyright owner at the end of a finished project, right? So you've got a 5 minute short or a 5 hour limited series or anything in between. That thing that's going to end up on a screen and go out into the world for others to see is protected by copyright law. And there's got to be one owner of that copyright. Because if there's more than one owner or that ownership is not clear, you're almost never going to get the distribution or funding, because in every one of those contracts, you're going to be saying and representing to the other party, we own all of the rights. No one has any potential infringement claims. Well, the only way that can be true is if you do the work ahead of time correctly. But working back from that basic principle, I think sometimes helps people get grounded. You simply cannot put a film out into the world without having gone through the legal process, period. I mean, you can try, it may come down quickly and you'll get a bunch of people yelling at you and you won't make any money. Doesn't mean you're not physically able to do it. You can right click, copy and paste all day long, but it might be copyright infringement all day, right? So just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. And in this industry, working back from the copyright, one copyright owner, and making sure that's true is necessary. If you are so typically what happens is for a new film project, a lot of times particularly if you're going to take other people's money, and this is another thing we'll talk about. But if you are putting together a new film project, we recommend that you start a new company, typically an LLC, very simple process, right. But you form a company and that company is going to be the copyright owner. And a lot of times it's, name a title of film, LLC or something like that, right? And that, but if say the two of you are working on the concept, you've worked up some treatments, maybe you've shot some spec footage, or you started to put together a deck or a trailer or a wish list of whatever the stuff you start to put together as this thing comes together. Maybe you have a screenplay that's reasonably well developed or something like that. But if you haven't formed that entity yet, the individual humans are the owners of the copyright. If you both did it, you might be joint authors, but you might disagree about what to do with it. And yet copyright law says you each have all of the rights. You can't infringe each other. One of you could go left, one of you can go right, and the other party couldn't do anything about it. So you never want joint authorship or joint ownership in these situations because it's really messy. Mm-hmm. So what you do is you would form the new film LLC, and then each of you, if the idea is that the two of you are going to be co-owners of that to start with, you're going to be on the producer side. We would have you do a contribution agreement, which is a written contract between you, individual person, and new LLC, in which you contribute into the new LLC all of your intellectual property rights that have developed so far in the concept that's being contemplated. And you would agree that all future efforts that you make in furtherance of this project are going to be as works made for hire for the LLC. So in one written document, you've transferred ownership of anything that already exists, and you've transferred ownership of anything that you create going forward. That way, and then in return, the LLC grants you, individual human, 50% ownership in the form of LLC membership units or whatever. And so now we have an LLC that actually owns all the intellectual property that has happened so far. That's the first step.
Okay.
And then at any point, now if in putting that material together, you've already worked with other people, you got a friend who's a great DP and somebody else, whipped up some music for you, conceptual or whatever. Mm-hmm. Get the same document from everybody else. If those people are not going to be owners in the LLC, but you still want to comp them or give them some right to participate in the future, it might look like a slightly different agreement. But the point is, you got to get it in writing from every human being who touches the film to be certain that at the end of the day, you've got one owner of the copyright. So working back from that one owner, you start with yourselves, start with the immediate people. And then as you look out, okay, we're going to need more crew. Well, you're going to have a standard crew agreement. It's going to vary because the first page may say some person's going to be there for 20 days and get paid this much. Somebody else is going to be there for 3 days and get paid this much, right? You feel those things are variable, but the terms and conditions are going to be the same. And everybody who steps foot on a set or into a post-production bay or anything else has signed something that says all of the results and proceeds of their work will be works made for hire owned by New Film LLC.
Mhm.
Unequivocal, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If somehow you don't pay them, they can sue you for money, but they can't go into court and take that copyright back. That also has to be in the written agreement. It's a little nuance. It's very, very important in the entertainment industry. People need to say, I will not and cannot and give up my right to walk into court and try to get a temporary restraining order or some kind of injunction to get the film shut down because I wasn't paid. I agree that if you breach or something, I can sue you for money, but I can't impact the rights that I've granted to you in terms of copyright ownership. And that's necessary too, because you could have 5 or 500 people on a film, and you can't take the chance that any one of them would get upset, walk into a state court judge who doesn't know anything about the film industry and grants a 3-week injunction, and everything has to dead stop.
Yeah.
Right. So these are all little things that you work towards to get your good contracts in place. And there's more detail as it goes along, but the basic principle is every single human that touches the project in any way, shape, or form has to have a written agreement that says work for hire. Those words need to be in it. One of those rare cases in the law where you really do have magic words.
Yeah.
So, if that's in place, now you can start looking out and say, well, what next? Right. But that first thing is necessary. And one of the reasons, sometimes say, wow, how much do lawyers cost? And I got it. Well, maybe I'll wait or whatever. And so what I always tell people is, if you get comfortable with the idea, and you got to have an attorney that understands the space. That's critical.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get comfortable with the idea that having production legal is a line item in my budget, just like, camera rental, any other insurance, any other aspect, all of your crew, various people, talent, everything, catering, literally everything in the budget. Production legal is just a line item in there. And it's typically done at some percentage of the budget. So if a budget is, and this is, again, take somebody that understands how to work in this industry, because that's industry standard in terms of our billing. So, if the budget is above $1 million, $2 million, something like that, the legal fees might be in the 1.5% to 2.5% range. If the budget's $100,000, the legal fees might be closer to 10% or more, because the work isn't really that radically different depending on the size of the budget, right? And so, but whatever it is, figure that out up front, get a quote about that from when you're putting your budget together, and just count on it, put it in there. Mm-hmm. And it's not something that you think of, I always have to write a check for my lawyer. No, my lawyer is like my light bill and my camera payments and everything else. It's just one of my regular ongoing expenses on a project by project basis. And if you're going out and raising independent financing for a particular project, it's just in your budget. Mm-hmm. The people investing in you are going to expect that you have a lawyer. In fact, they're going to count on it, right? They're going to count on you being able to say you can protect the copyright. You've done all this stuff correctly. So, and then, what we do for that percentage of the budget, we do those crew agreements, talent agreements, location agreements, a variety of other things that might come up on a one-off basis. But then, are you going to have music? Are you going to license third-party music? Well, if so, that's a separate budget. And so we do sometimes do music clearance work, depending on the nature of the project, or composition agreements, things like composer agreements, things like that. But typically that doesn't fit under production legal. That's just part of the music budget. Mm-hmm. You may not really need us. You may have a buddy who's going to compose all new works and we give you a simple composer agreement, it's done. Or maybe you've got, you just have to have these 5, Taylor Swift songs. Well, what's your budget? Yeah. Right. But we're going to be in there somewhere. But these are little things that filmmakers can start to realize. Okay, here's how I figure out the lawyer part of this.
Mhm.
Production legal is all of this stuff that has to happen once there is a budget, once we have that budget, that funding in place to pay the crew and all these things. Now all of those contracts need to happen. That's production legal. Music licensing, if the lawyers need to get involved, they may, but that goes under the music budget. And they will work with you and tell you, here's what I think it will cost and all of that stuff. So if you really believe in some key song is necessary, talk to your lawyer early, and find out what it's going to cost. And can you even do that?
Yeah.
Right? Don't fall in love with a bunch of footage based around this one song that you can never license.
Mhm.
And then the last piece is the front piece. The last piece is we need to form the new LLC. We need the contribution agreements. We need the investor agreements. We need to put together the pitch deck to go out for private financing, all of which involves legal documents, but you don't have a budget yet. That is an out-of-pocket spend. But we typically do that work for a flat fee that we'll tell you about ahead of time, try to keep it as modest as can be so that, we're going to do this work for this amount of money. And so that's still a way of early on the filmmaker saying, what's it going to cost? What do I need from my lawyer and what's it going to cost? So you're not surprised. You're not in that fear of, God, I hear these horror stories about hourly billing rates or how do they spend so much time on this? And literally every time I pick up the phone call, it costs me $100. We don't want to do that, right? It does not make sense for us to do the work in your industry if that's how we bill. You just won't call.
Right.
Right.
You'll fire us and go hire somebody that knows what they're doing. So we have to understand how to fit within your economic structure, the life flow, the money flow of a film project. And we will talk to you ahead of time for no charge to say, okay, here's what you need to get started. This is what that would cost. Call me when you're ready. If you get that, and then that turns into this budget, here's what our production legal fee will be, because I want you to be able to put my number in your budget when you go talk to an investor, because you want to need to show that investor, this is my real budget. This is truly everything I need to get this onto a screen.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'd like to just what you're saying is super valuable because I think what some people look at this as like, oh, this is a cost, which means it's an obstacle in the way of me making my film. When in reverse, I actually think having made one or two films without much legal help at all, that's extremely valuable and helpful for me to think like I have someone I could call to ask a question every now and then. I have someone who's going to help me stay on top of all my paperwork because I'm personally, when I get into the throes of make, shoot, edit.
Right.
It is almost impossible whether I'm making a fiction film or a documentary film to stay on top of all of the paperwork. And
absolutely.
And usually we're self-producing, right? And so having someone there to keep all that stuff covered, and then even further down the road when distributor relationships start to happen, I can also see where this becomes hyper valuable because if you've got all your ducks in a row, that working experience is way smoother and faster. Whereas
absolutely,
if you don't, then you're just trying to dig everything up in retrospect, and that's hard, if not impossible, sometimes to do properly. So it really is actually a movie making mechanism rather than a wrench in the gears.
I'm glad that you're getting that point. You've come to that realization because that's my point to make today and as often as I can is we are a necessary part of your team. So when you start from blank slate to end up on a screen, all of the steps that are necessary and the people that do the different things are the team. And the producer role, largely is assembling that team, right? And the right team with the right project and everything else. And then what's it going to cost? How are we going to fund it? Sometimes the producer role is more time on the phone calling for money or whatever, right? But it's still part of that teamwork. And we are a member of the team. That's why we're in the budget. Our fee doesn't go up or down depending on how much time we talk. Why? Because we signed on to the team. Some teams are busy this time and slow another time. I'm not telling you got to pay me more this month and less this month. It's just, here's the fee. And once you have the budget, you're going to pay a certain amount of that fee when we start. You're going to be some of it at a certain milestone, just like everybody else,
Mhm.
right? It's just, we literally are just part of your team. We're necessary part of the team, just as every one of those other roles on set is. And for you guys who are doing, with multi-hyphenate, writer, director, producer, actor, star, janitor. If you had to hire someone else to do any one of those roles, someone of your experience, quality, geographic location, all these factors, for some reason, you break your ankle and you can't go on set, or you can't do especially if you've got other people's money involved. You need to be able, well, I'm going to grab so and so and see if they're available. They could drop into the directing role or the whatever role, right? Well, if you are not, if your budget doesn't include market rate for each task that you are doing, in addition to this global producer role, then your budget isn't real.
Mhm.
It may be what you spent to make the movie, but it's not a real budget. It's not the kind of budget that will withstand scrutiny from investors or from somebody else. And if I'm going to tell you that I'll work at some percentage of your budget, I need that to be the real budget,
Mhm.
not an artificial one. And a lot of times, emerging filmmakers will say, well, I don't need to pay myself right away. I'm going to, hopefully get something back on the back. Well, I hope you do too. But my strong recommendation is do not count on the only money you get coming from the back end, because it's actually pretty rare that back end happens, right? So pay yourself out of the only money that you know will exist. That's the money in your budget. If you haven't accounted for paying yourself your market rate, unless you have lottery winnings and you don't need to ever write a check for anything, how are you really going to know if you're making a life in this business? And what is your market rate if someone hired you? This isn't your film, but you get known in your community. Somebody says, hey, will you come direct? Or will you come produce this with me? Or whatever. What would your fee be?
Right.
You have a market and it'll gradually grow up, and you have precedence, and I always get at least this credit. I mean, that's how this world works.
Well,
Your IMDb page grows. So pay yourself the same way. And if you decide to defer payment, that's okay. That's a deferral decision, but your budget is still real. And then when you get proceeds, you pay yourself then. That's okay. If that enables you to actually get the thing done with a little bit less money right now, maybe while you're still raising or whatever. But don't pretend that you don't have to pay yourself. This is something that I see a lot of young filmmakers do. And it's something to get over, sort of like learning to treat your lawyer as part of your line item. Treat yourself as part of the line item. Critically important.
yeah, yeah. That's definitely something I think we experienced on our first film where we're like, we're just gonna do everything and we'll pay ourselves, lunch money and
Sure.
and then on the second film we were a little more conscious of these are our actual rates. Now, the amount of money that we ended up raising, because that was more of an ongoing budget because it was a documentary.
Sure.
If it didn't get fully financed, it just meant we were eating our own income to a degree, which was
And
fine
and
for
that's
us. But
and
like you
that
said, it
is
was a real
yeah,
budget. And so that reframing is kind of what happened from film one to film two and then
right.
ongoing from there. That's why sometimes you see a lot of director names, actor names, and sometimes DP names and other people in the executive producer lines on movie credits, because that's essentially what they're doing. They're like, this is my rate and this is how much I'm actually paid. And
Right.
and
No question. Yeah. And if it's properly accounted for, as it should be, it should count as, say, if my rate's $100,000 and I'm going to take 50 in cash and have 50 in the deferral, then if I want to treat it, there's a couple different ways you can do it. One is I'm going to treat that as if I put $50,000 in cash into the budget, right? And therefore, I'm sitting here over on the side of the investors to the extent of my 50,000, because typically the proceeds when they first come in will pay your investors back first, often plus 15 or 20% premium. And then after that's been done, They share in 50% of the profits, and you share in 50% of the profits. So it depends on where you put that deferral payback. If you put that deferral payback as comp, it gets paid out of first proceeds before the investors get anything, because it's a cost, right? There's nothing to give to the investors until all the costs have been paid. But then it's fixed at that $50,000 amount. You get the other
Right.
50, you're done. Or you say, I'm going to treat this as an investment, which means I may never get it. But I'm going to get, if I put 50,000 and the other investors put in 500,000, well, then I'm going to get 10% or 9%, whatever, of each bit of proceeds that goes back to the investors.
Right.
And I hope I'll get what I would have otherwise gotten. But I also might get more, because then I'm sitting in the profit side if it becomes profitable. Yes, and that's worth an executive producer credit. That's typically that structure. But you're right. The starting point included the full appropriate rate for that person. And that's, I think, the key thing to try to remember as you're putting this together.
Well, and what you're explaining is so valuable, because understanding that from the side of like, this is what I should be charging, and it's protecting myself as the filmmaker so that I can know how to negotiate, you know. But it's also
Right.
helpful when you're negotiating with production houses, other key crew, like you're saying, you can say, would you be willing to adjust, even name actors, you know, adjust these
Sure.
rates so that we're good on whatever your contract and agreements are, but you understand we're working here with resources that we may or may not have.
Yeah.
That might help them be able to negotiate into a situation where the movie gets made, as
Right.
opposed to um, where they say,
Right.
"Well, this is how much I cost," and you say, "Well, I can't afford that. Goodbye." It's like you might actually be able to work something out if they're willing
Right.
to think of it that way.
Yeah, and having an understanding of those little nuances and how they fit into the finance structure, and putting some skin in the game yourself, so to speak, if you're at a certain level, becomes relevant, right? And that can become a valuable thing. But again, all of that has to be done in writing, has to be properly documented, has to be something that all of your investors can see and agree with, right? It's not like you're going to ask your investors each time, "Hey, I think I might want to do something. Are you guys okay with this?"
Right.
No, you do what you do, but by saying, "This is how we're putting this together, this is what I'm doing," it gives them more confidence that you do know, in fact, what you're doing, and
Mhm.
you've thought about it in order to attract whatever it is necessary to get a larger audience. All of those factors, right? So they all kind of play in together. But you're right; it starts with having a reasonably comfortable understanding of what it really takes to budget and finance a film.
Yeah.
Um, and that, I think, that's one of the other things that I try to stress to new filmmakers is, um, because you're right, the way you describe, shoot, 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 or the way I sometimes say, get some money, shoot some footage, go get some more money, shoot some more footage. It's very common, and it's not necessarily wrong given what you do, but it does put you in a continually limited, you're never going to get past here level if that's how you're always doing it. A lot of great documentaries get made that way because it's kind of this guerrilla process over a long period of time.
Mhm.
But these days, so in Missouri, we have a new film tax credit. There are 30 some odd states that have some form of a tax incentive to attract film financing. Here in Missouri, and this is pretty common elsewhere, you can't you get a percentage of the amount of money you spend in the state back in the form of a tax credit that you use or can sell to investors or whatever to help finance the film or return money to the investors. So what counts in your state specific spend becomes very relevant, right? In Missouri, any money you spend before you get your tax credit approval letter doesn't count.
Mm.
So if you get some money, shoot some footage, get some money, shoot some footage, oh, let's get a tax, it's never going to work for you. You can still make the movie, but that fairly powerful piece of financing structure is not going to be available to you. So
Hmm.
instead, it elevates the role of the producer to the front instead of just alongside along the way. The producer job, assembling the team, what's it going to cost to get everybody lined up? What agreements are ready to go in place? Okay, we've got these agreements locked up. We've got a commitment from this lead actor, this director within a window of time. We can announce they've agreed to be attached. or some level of structure, and I need their names to go out to investors. Whatever is going on, however you need to do that, getting all that in place without having to pay for it yet, or keep the cost that you pay to a minimum. Sometimes you have development costs that you're just never going to get back.
Right.
But, you know, get it all lined up, then get the commitments for the financing, then take that paperwork, go to the state film office, get your approval letter that says, you know, you, based on what you submitted, we'll approve a tax credit in the amount of $412,000, whatever it is. Okay, now you can start spending that money. Now you go to the, you know, so, but you have to put that together first, which does change the sort of standard default go, go, go mentality that you've always been. If you want to elevate up and put together projects that have the potential for larger budgets, more significant financing, tax credits in play, things like that, you do have to do that producer hustle pretty far down the road, really, before you start rolling cameras or anything else.
Yeah. So, okay. So I think that a lot of times a first-time filmmaker making a no-budget first film just to, you know, get their name on something and get it out there, there's going to be some obvious things that they're aware of, like, you know, let's put a sticker over this Apple logo so we don't get in trouble, and let's make sure we have rights to a song that we want, or a composer.
Or just avoid that entirely.
I think they're often using templates or platforms for their paperwork. And then on the back end might be getting more legal help for the film.
Yeah, because they just all they need is really like E&O insurance or whatever to get it distributed. It's like I've got my DIY contracts and I got my E&O at the end that, and then I got my movie out.
And then they grow into, you know, more, you know, this becomes bigger money on the line, bigger investors and stuff like that. I'm curious about how you approach, because, you know, we have a way that we do it, but I don't know, maybe it's maybe it's not good. When you're doing the contract for your investors, they're not owners in the LLC, correct?
Well, often they are.
They
are. I mean, you don't have to do it that way, but that's the most common. And it's often the simplest. But by being owners in the LLC, that doesn't mean they get editorial control or management decision making like that. All of that's very clearly set out. So you have an operating agreement that governs the operations of the LLC, not the day-to-day business management, not the product, but the operational relationship among the owners and how they interact with decision making. Manager, one of you would be the manager. Manager makes all the decisions, right? There's like 3 or 4 things the members get to vote on, and that's like major corporate changes that almost never come up in this type of an environment. So you're not giving up control in that way. Now, you might have to negotiate if you've got a pretty significant investor, or maybe one investor for the whole thing, and they want to have some level of input. You just have to decide, am I willing to give that for this person's money?
So are you waiting to form the LLC until you have all the financiers?
No. You do that first. Forming an LLC is, you know, $50 some odd in Missouri, a couple $100 somewhere else. It's an online, it happens right away. But that's only creating it into its existence.
Yeah.
You still need the operating agreement. You need to figure out your subscription agreement structure. I mean, I would always recommend, you know, you could certainly, if you have the opportunity to have some kind of organic introduction or whatever to potential investors and they want to hear about your project, go ahead and have those conversations, however you feel. If you put together a deck or a short or something to tease it up, or a proof of concept or treatment, or if you've got a screenplay, whatever you might have to attract somebody. Nothing wrong with beginning conversations like that.
Yeah.
But before they agree to give you any money, unless it's a unique person and relationship, they're going to want to see the documents.
Yeah.
And most of the time, they're going to hand their documents to a lawyer and an accountant who don't play in the entertainment world. Right? Maybe they have some a little bit because this investor does this regularly. But generally speaking, they're going to be looking at it just, how does the legal document read? Is the operating agreement of the company structured correctly? Is this properly done from accounting and tax purposes? So my view is always my job is to minimize the reasons someone can say no,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you want to go talk to a potential investor to put $100,000 into your film or whatever. You want, they first and foremost have to think it's a good film.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can visualize that. I can see that in my head. Yeah, I think I believe, second, do I believe you can make it? Have you assembled the team or given me confidence in whatever factors I'm going to measure that you're actually the filmmaker that can carry off this vision and get it in the can and up on a screen? So those two questions are first. If the answer to either of those is I'm not sure, full stop. You're never going to need me. But if the answer to those is yes, then the third question for them is there an audience here? Have you convinced me that there's a potential audience here that's at least as big as the budget or 1.5 times the budget? So I might actually get my money back. And that's comps, that's other factors, that's minimum guarantee deals from a distributor ahead of time if you've got right names or whatever it is. But somehow the third question, and remember, the third question doesn't care about your audience if he doesn't like your film.
Yeah.
So these questions get answered in order. Yes, I want to see this film made. Yes, I believe you could do it. Yes, I believe there's an audience. Okay, here's the documents. I can't have anything in those documents that's going to make their accountant or their lawyer go, what is this?
Right.
This is a little off, right? So we craft things that are very common, understood, both in the industry, but also in almost any industry, because the relationship in this structure is a very standard structure, right?
Right.
So the risk or the exotic part of it is your story and you, not the legal structure.
Yeah.
So I think anytime you can present to anybody out there that you understand and have your legal structure buttoned up, we have good counsel, we have a solid agreements, here's how they fit in the budget, this is our investment document package, here's who our lawyers are, all this stuff. That says we're grown-ups. We're legit, we're a business. And all I have to do is sell you on my product, not my company, or not my understanding of how even to wander through the world, right? You could be a brilliant filmmaker and have no idea how to put this together. That's okay. Partner up with somebody that's a very good producer and can do these things. Because like you said, when you're going, you got a little of everything, it's almost impossible to keep track of everything.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's where teams with people with different right brain, left brain superpowers make a great combination. Line producer. And these days now with the tax credits, you got to be really meticulous in your record keeping and your invoicing and payment structure as you're paying through production, because you got to hand all that to the CPAs. They're going to audit it and they're going to send it off to the state, and that's going to determine what you get back.
Right.
So again, that role, if that's not you, then you need someone who can do that and will do that well. And that just becomes part of your team.
So, and I'll mention this, on our first film, we got a lot of people asking, so I shot that film. I'm a mediocre DP. I'll just say that. I'm all right. And
I totally get it. I'm a below average guitar player.
Yes,
Totally,
love it.
All good. Yep.
And so I work really hard, but I work with, we had a really good art person on that film, Claire, and we had a really, really good colorist. And so people ask, like, what'd you do? We said, well, we did some creative stuff with some cool vintage lensing. We worked with a really good production designer, and we had a great colorist. And when I work, especially with my colorist, I'll usually sit with him, and he's a great post supervisor. He's a really talented editor, really good post guy all around, but super good at anything post, especially color. Every time I sit with him, I feel like I'm getting like huge masterclass crash courses and everything he knows.
Yeah.
And no matter how many years I've worked with him, it's the same story. I never will know as much as he does about post because I don't live and breathe it. And
Right.
yet, like, I'm just so grateful to have that person in my corner, And so that's kind of the sense I'm getting even just from this conversation. It's like when you have someone like that in your post corner, in your color corner, in your art corner, in your cinematography, you get someone like that in your legal corner, Because like you
Yeah,
said, I could make $25,000 pictures or even $150,000 pictures almost all day long, and I could probably DIY some of the paperwork, but I really want to crack the $1 million picture stuff and
yeah,
start to get into the
yeah.
one and the 10 and the multiple tens, of
Right.
millions. And that's just going to be a necessary relationship. And as I make films with people who know way more than me on that stuff, I'm going to learn too, and so like, I start to know
Absolutely.
this is the step. We're going to take those steps faster the second time around because we get it. I'm
Absolutely.
not getting up to
Well, and
speed.
like you
So
said, it can cost you. For example, if you start shooting and you don't know you have to have your tax papers in advance, for your tax credit from your state, and you're counting on that to come through, and then you can't get it for what you've already
Absolutely.
spent, you're going to
Yeah.
miss out. You're
Yeah.
going to waste money. Or we actually like had someone who was interested in investing because we believed that they could write it off tax deductible.
through section 181.
'Yep.
181 was it?
Yep.
Yep.
And then their CPA and our CPA were like, I don't think you can unless
Because
they're in the LLC and they're actively working on it every day.
we hadn't set it up beforehand early enough as well. There was a timeline thing that yeah, missed
Yeah.
on.
Anyway, because
Yeah.
we didn't really know how to
Right.
make that happen, we lost out on that opportunity. Um, so I do think that there are costs to not having the legal help in advance. And sometimes we just think about like, oh, what does it cost me to get it?
Yeah, but what does it
But
cost
what
you
does it
not to
cost you
get
not
it?
to get
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
Well, and I think, yes, which is why, and again, this is on me to price myself in a way that works for your structure,
Yeah.
right? The dollar amount may vary a little bit, as everything does on certain projects, but the structure remains the same. And we're lined up and pointing in the same direction as you guys. And that it hopefully people recognize that that simple fact, which is the relationship between you and your lawyer, as one of, oh, I only call when I need to, and it's always expensive, and my lawyer's talking to me, and it's call's going on now for I don't know how long, but quit telling me about your kid's vacation because you're charging me for it, right? There's some part of the brain that's dealt with lawyers that has that going on all the time.
Mhm.
And some many types of legal practice, that's still the sort of the best way to capture the relationship, but not here, right? For two reasons. One, it doesn't fit for you. You need to be able to call when you need to be able to call, period, end of sentence, full stop, without wondering whether you should. If your brain has said, I wonder if I should call the lawyer, you know the answer is yes. You've already spotted the issue. But if there's any reason you don't, and it's because of my billing practices, that's a problem with my business model, not your thinking. So we want to remove that, right? The second is think of it from my perspective. I can do things quickly and well for you because I've spent years educating myself and learning how to do it and putting time and effort to build the practice, to build the relationships, to deeply understand how this all works. If I only chart, but because of that, I can do something in an hour that would take someone else 10 hours. If
Right.
all I do is charge you for my time, I'm getting zero reward or value from why I'm actually able to do it that well quickly and have it be correct.
Yeah. You're
Right.
not incentivized to,
Yeah, it doesn't make
make
any
faster and
sense.
more efficient.
I'm stealing from myself and you're still going to distrust my bill.
Right. Well,
So we got to discard that and think differently about how to do it.
Yeah.
and I think that DIYing it in the past has served me at least a little bit to kind of, learn some things, but
Sure, sure.
it certainly has a ceiling because I simply can't get movies made if I'm spending, like you said, 10 hours. I could easily spend a whole day trying to draft up documents that I'm only going to send
That
to one department, and I've got to do that for all the departments. And
th-
I know this
yeah.
firsthand. Like I've drafted a lot of stuff myself based on templates and things like that. And it also leads to some anxiety in today's litigious culture when you're
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
think I'm doing okay, but I definitely didn't go to law school. So
Well, I think you just hit on one of the most important reasons. One, yes, you might actually not get it all right. That's possible. But more importantly, even if you did assemble it, and there's nothing wrong if you're a person that likes to learn, before you get into something, I really kind of want to understand what you're getting into. If
mhm.
I'm going to hire a lawyer, I want to know enough to know whether the lawyer's telling me the truth or whether I can tell if this lawyer knows what they're doing. So whatever effort you've put into DIYing it yourself over the years has been valuable, taught you good things. But really, you get so many hours to be awake a day. And if you're doing things that someone else can do better, faster, and appropriately, and already considered in the budget, then get away from them, let them do their stuff, and go do the things you need to do. And that's frees you up to do your craft, to know that you've got somebody in the team that knows that part. And now you've educated yourself by doing the DIY to have enough knowledge to recognize that they are doing their job, right? And that,
Yeah.
I think, is so. I'm thrilled if I talk to people that have already made an attempt to put the contracts together. You've done some educating yourself. Yes, I know I got to have people sign work for. You may know a lot more than you think you know. If you had to make a list of all the things you know about film contracts, you probably know a lot. But being able to tell when a particular document appears to have what you need, but doesn't have that one paragraph on page 13 that's actually going to be relevant, or whatever, right? And also, one of the things that I tell creative, both filmmakers and other creative people that are launching or expanding, and particularly wanting to get up and punch up above their weight, as you just said, go up, add a couple digits to your budgets. Well, one of the ways that you can hurt yourself is when those bigger players ask you to send your contracts and they take one look at it and they go, that's LegalZoom, that's from somewhere else, that's somewhere else. Even if they're right. But if instead they all look the same, they've got your new little LLC logo on it or name, they're clearly drafted from one. Yes, they have all the stuff they're supposed to have, but they're all, even as simple as they're on the same font, there are no typos, reference each other properly. You can send a package, they can verify them. Yes, 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 yes. That is a statement that you are pros. You're going to be pros in the filmmaking, but you're also pros in assembling the necessary parts of the team for the business of making films. And that sometimes it's little stuff like that that just sends a different message. Your contracts are part of your brand. That may or may not be relevant in that many circumstances, but to some extent, it's always true.
Yeah.
If you have to send somebody the contract that you want them to sign, that is an expression of you and your brand and your professionalism, not just the terms, but the contract itself. And is it the right contract for this situation, lined up correctly or not? Those are, again, part of your brand.
That makes me think of the fact that, so I came at this just making short films and stuff, but then when we need to make money, how do I make money doing this? At least for me, and I know a lot of people are in my same boat. Oh, I'm not going to make money doing this, making movies. So I'm going to go make wedding videos. I'm going to make commercials. I'm going to work
Sure.
with local businesses and whatever. And what do? You end up starting to make DIY contracts for yourself, and you are adjusting those contracts after 50 to 100 wedding films or like a few
Sure.
dozen commercials because you're realizing I ran into a pitfall here with a client or this
Yeah.
thing hurt me. But like, how many of us have made 14 to 50 films? You know what I mean? Like, to have that experience to be like, okay, I'm avoiding all these pitfalls. So when you go into feature filmmaking, which isn't a weeks or months long endeavor, it's a
Right.
years long endeavor for each film. It is nice to have someone who's gone through this 50 times or 100 times and be
Sure.
like, look,
Sure.
this thing is solid. Like, we get this, we know how to navigate this with a cleanliness and a nice efficiency that is really effective, and that makes a difference because I can tell you, working in any industry in any field, especially from like a video background, uh, you adjust your contract almost all the time because you're like, oh, like they got mad at me for eating. Okay, now my contract says I must be allowed to eat. It's like like stuff like that, and like
Believe me, that is how contracts get drafted and get improved because of things. Sometimes you're like, how is this? Why is that paragraph there? Because sometime at one point it wasn't there and something bad happened.
Yeah.
Right. That's true. That's very true. And listen, I do the same thing too. I don't want to give anybody the impression that I've finished learning and I know everything there is about it. Not even remotely close. But I have these basic principles that aren't going to change. And we come at it from an approach that recognizes we fit into a budget that's appropriate. And if we're too expensive for your budget right now, then fine. If and when you're ready, you'll be ready and we'll be here and you'll be a better client and I'll be a better lawyer for you at that time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm not really doing you any good to give you sort of half of something.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, sometimes there is sort of a delayed response, if you will, but
Yeah.
I'm always learning. Things come up. Sometimes I'll see other contracts. I'm like, wow, that is such a much better way to deal with this thing that I always have in this clunky over here. Easier to read, easier to understand for non-lawyers. I'm going to just borrow that and put that into my structure going forward. So I do the same thing, right? It's a very common structure. But over time, you start to see, okay, this category of things can come up. So we're going to draft this way to capture all of those things. So we don't have to list each one, right? And little by little, you shape your contracts. But the other thing is, sometimes you all as in your industry, you might be working on other people's projects because that's another way, filmmakers are always working on each other's projects while they're putting together their next one themselves. Hones your craft, builds your network, all those things. But you might be asked to sign somebody else's paper. It's a really good thing to look at if you're also creating your own contracts. Say, well, what am I being handed?
Yeah.
What do I think about that? Oh, that's crap. I know much better. Or, wow, that's actually more comprehensive than I'm doing. The point is that it's a constant learning process in any good endeavor, I think. And this is no different. We are changing things that we wrote even a year ago to deal with AI. Because how AI impacts copyright ownership. Yeah. And so what do you need to make sure didn't actually sneak in something that undermines your copyright?
Yeah.
Just so it's always new. Distribution models are changing rapidly, radically. How do you get the thing on a screen? It used to be, studios and festival, and maybe you get this or that. Now there's a million ways to get on streaming platform. How do you figure out what makes sense? How do you know if you're getting treated fairly? Are you getting the money you're supposed to get? This new thing popped up and it's shiny and it's, somethingnew.com. I'll just go there. What's their history? Who are they? Those sorts of things. There's always uncertainty, right? So, and probably never be able to eliminate it entirely, but the more comfort you get with not being afraid of the legal side of things, educate yourself and then find somebody that works well with you and fits into your structure, and then know that that's going to be covered. But continue learning. If you get in a conversation with somebody or you're at a festival or whatever, you're talking to other filmmakers and they told you about something that they had just done for the first time and seemed to really work and you're not familiar with it, look into it, right? Why not? And if you were working with me and you came back and said, hey, I was at this conference and I saw this. Have you ever heard of this? Well, maybe I'm like, oh yeah, I just saw something, or no, let me go look. But the point is you are working. If you think of your lawyer as someone on the filmmaking team, well, then everybody on the team can learn from everybody else.
Yeah.
Including the lawyer can learn from you. And if you start thinking like that, there's a budget. Okay, everybody in the team's getting paid. Right? Well, now we just go do our stuff.
Right.
And it doesn't become this thing that you fight against, or this fear that you have, or this cost that you just wish you didn't have to have. You need lawyers, you need insurance, you need a handful of things that have nothing to do with the quality of the content.
Yeah.
But they're necessary.
Well,
and don't fight them, just find good partners.
And you say they have nothing to do with the quality of the content, but if they come back and bite you, it will affect, or it could affect, the quality of the content significantly, or even the quality of the content's reach. Because
you can have you can literally have the most fabulous content, but if you can't get it on the screen because you didn't do the legal right, who cares?
Exactly.
Somebody told me years ago, and I've always used this phrase. It's not mine, but I've embraced it. Please don't fall in love with footage you can't use. And there's different ways that can happen. So figure out, okay, if I want to use this footage, what rights are involved? Are those humans inside? Do I need to get releases from them? The logo's here. Where am I standing? What am I saying? When I'm done here, can I get it out in the public, or will there be barriers?
Yeah.
And if you're not sure, then ask. We'll talk it through ahead of time.
Right.
In my early days working with production company, and they're, really creative guys, and they would be, they'd fall in love with some footage, and I would be thinking in my head, God, if you just move the camera over here,
Hmm.
all that stuff that we're stressing over wouldn't be in frame. It's not necessary, but it looked kind of cool at the time because of the way the sun was hitting. But it's because we didn't block and tackle a little bit ahead of time to figure out those things you don't want. These things are okay in the environment in which you're shooting, right? So you don't want to blur a bunch of stuff if you don't have to, or cut off your, why? Because you didn't think about it. And that's a super simplified example, but some variation of it is true,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so so I always think it's a revisit start of each new project.
Yeah.
A quick call. Hey, this is a new thing about, we're stretching this. Here's some things that come up. Is there anything we should watch out for legally, or anything else we need to know? No, sounds good. You're going to use this. Here's that. Okay. When you're ready to go, standard, we'll do this fixed fee, but it doesn't cost anything if you want to call and talk through your next project, or it shouldn't.
Right.
Right. This is just a conversation about, hey, we might be working together in the future, but here's a little bit where we're at. Can you tell me what I should prepare for? What would your budget numbers be to put you in the line item when we go pitch? We either need this or we don't, but if we do, what would it cost? Have those conversations with your lawyer up front. And you might find out you're ready to go. You might find out you got more work to do. But either way, that's not a wasted conversation.
Right.
And you'll get better at them each time.
Well, Pete, I super appreciate the time you've taken to talk with us. I can tell right now, first of all, we're probably going to want to do another episode with you down the line.
Okay.
I already have
At least a personal call.
I already have subjects, and that was the second thing I was going to say. We might just be calling you just for our projects, because we have one or two right on the horizon.
Yeah.
So, and so thank you. I feel like I've learned a ton. I feel actually more empowered and a little more focused. And I think this came at a good time for us because of the stage that our next project or two is at. It's like, okay, this is the right time for us to have met you and had this conversation. So we hope that everyone listening feels the same. Like, okay, I know a little more about this thing. It's demystified. It's not scary anymore. And because I can tell you right now, it was scary for me before this call. Like, there's things that people I didn't want to talk to because I said that phone call is going to cost me $200, and it's exactly what you said. Exactly.
Sure.
So thank you so much for coming on with the show.
Yeah, no, first of all, you're welcome. Thanks for inviting me. It's my pleasure. And I enjoyed meeting you at the festival. Hope I'll just get to see both of you guys in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, truly happy to have the conversation. And I really do genuinely I love doing this stuff, right? Because I do it because I love it. It's my passion. I didn't do it right out of law school. It took me a long time to work my way back around it in a way that I could really be a professional at it, right? So I care about it. I love the industry. I want people to be successful. I'm excited about new opportunities in different regions. So if I can be useful, I'm happy to do it. And like I said, I really do learn from filmmakers and other lawyers and everybody in the process. It's always evolving. So happy to do it. Yeah, reach out. And if anybody is, catching the podcast and is curious for more information, if you're interested,
how do we connect with you? Where should we send people?
So the easiest way is just to go to thescreenlawyer.com, all one word, and that takes you to a landing page. It'll connect you with my law firm bio, all my contact info. It's got a link to my podcast and social media. We've got a YouTube channel, all of it under The Screen Lawyer. And we talk, we interview guests. We also talk. I did an episode this morning on for our podcast on the Kendrick Lamar and Drake defamation lawsuit and battle, and some of the weird nuances behind the legal side of that very famous feud. So sometimes the episodes are more like that, like geeking out a little bit on legal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times I've got guests who are filmmakers I want to hear what they're doing. How'd you get here? What's your story? What's next? What do you, all of that. So I'll reach out to you guys as well. Count on that.
Yeah, we'd love to return the favor. So
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time. And we'll put your link to your website in the show notes as well. So
great. Yeah, thank you. And then just send me whenever you've got it. But I really appreciate it. This has been fun.
Yeah, thanks so much,
Thanks, Pete.
All right, guys, take care.
You too.
Thanks for joining us today.
If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, you'll love the Feature Filmmaker Academy, a program designed to teach anyone how to finance and finish a feature film.
There are many resources teaching you how to do a great job, but what they don't teach you is how to get the job in the first place.
You cannot have a career making feature films until you've made at least one. Anyone can make a feature film using our proven model.
It's risk-free. If you follow all the steps in the program, you'll finance and finish a feature film or we'll give you your money back.
Learn more at invisiblemansion.com/feature filmmaker or click the link in the show notes.
If you find this free resource valuable, we'd really appreciate it if you leave us a review or share it with another filmmaker.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.